It is my pleasure to introduce Sergeant Joseph O'Neill. He is from the Honolulu Police Department and is currently overseeing the various initiatives of the agency's community outreach unit. In 2018, Joseph was tasked to assist with the expansion of the department's Health Efficiency Long-Term Partnership, aka Health Program, pioneered by Major Mike Lambert. From the success of health outreach operations, Joseph assisted Major Lambert with the conception and the launch of the HONU Mobile Navigation Center program. In April of this year, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, Joseph worked to continue the mission of the outreach and navigation through the POST initiative. To date, POST has helped over 680 individuals being affected by homelessness receive safe and shelter and services. So with that being said, Sergeant O'Neill, welcome, and I will turn the presentation over to you.
Thank you, Jonah. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for everyone that decided to watch this presentation. What I'll be talking about today is our Provisional Outdoor Screening and Triage program. I'll go into a little bit of the background of the program, where it started from, and why we're where we're at now, and then maybe a little bit about the future of what we see as far as our role, and take any questions. So with that, I'll start. Next slide, please. So I'm sure a lot of people watching this have seen the presentations that myself and Captain Mike Lambert have presented before about health and HONU, but for those of you that don't know, this started from missed opportunities to assist in HPD. So in 2018, we were trying to find ways that we could offer more services and do more in lieu of enforcement. And we all know the statistics that there's over 2,500 unsheltered individuals in the streets each day. And for HPD, these particular individuals, a lot of times the public will call 911 related to things that it's not necessarily a crime. And for our officers, a lot of times people don't understand that an officer has to respond to a call for service, whether it's criminal or not. So when a member of the public calls, if it's someone sleeping at a bus stop, if it's someone laying on a sidewalk, that's an opportunity for an HPD officer to offer someone services that may need help. And it may not be criminal, but we have to actually respond to each and every call. These complaints can sometimes be blocking sidewalks, they can be trespassing, panhandling, park closure, but this is an opportunity. We identified this as opportunities, and these interactions, they can be handled in a more service-oriented way versus a way of just trying to move on to the next call. Next slide, please. So the Community Outreach Unit, which I'm in charge of now as the acting lieutenant, it was created in 2018. This was done to expand the Health Efficiency Long-Term Partnerships Program island-wide. The HELP program was the program that was created to try to bridge the gap between enforcement and social service, to where we could find common ground where the police could offer services and work with providers to help with trying to find a long-term solution to the issue of unsheltered homelessness. And from these outreach operations that we conducted and group effort, mostly through the hard work of the partners in HELP, in 2018, 189 people were assisted in the shelters. And in 2019, it was 279. But how this looked in practice was we would get a group of providers together and we would go out to area parks or encampment locations, and we would be in plain clothes. We're not there to be in uniform or have any sort of enforcement action. And we would stand by to help with transport or the safety of the providers. And we would assist people in the shelter. So there'd be people that wanted to go into off the streets and somewhere else. We would try to facilitate that any way we could. Now, during those operations, well, shelter intake hours were limited, and the available categories of bed space would fill very quickly, whether that was female or male, or it was families. And that showed us that there's a need for 24-hour services. There was a need for a navigation center of sorts to where there'd be very low barrier and no wrong door policy, where you could get someone into something at the time that they need help. And I think, of course, a lot of people probably in the room now know better than me is that sometimes people don't want services during the day. Sometimes they don't want them at night. But if you catch the person when they do feel that they want services, that can be very successful. So 24 hours is very important. Next slide, please. So in 2018, we had the concept of the Lyft Mobile Navigation Center. It was rebranded as the Homeless Outreach and Navigation for Unsheltered HONU project. It's conceptualized by HPD as a way to give officers options. So to give officers a way to, other than handing out a services card or doing enforcement, they'd have a way for diversion, almost a diversion in each scenario they were dealing with someone unsheltered. So in December, after a lot of work on this, the HONU program was launched with the help of the Department of Community Services. We launched it in the Waipahu Cultural Gardens, and it saw a lot of success. And the program, I do want to mention, the program is a state-funded and city-managed 24-hour navigation center, and we found that was very important to be city-managed. And it's nothing against or anything speaking bad of private providers, because they're awesome. All of them are awesome. It's just that with a city-run center, being a city agency, which police are, we had a lot of ability to mold the program and dictate the low barriers. So if an officer, was trying to get someone into services, it wouldn't be the policies of a private agency to where maybe the person working might not want to take that person. Maybe that person had been kicked out for some reason or whatever may have happened in their facility. We wanted it to be city to where we could say, no, this person needs to be stabilized. You're going to take this person in, and we could try to create policies that would be the best for the person. So in April, due to COVID-19, we could not continue HONU in its format. Now, HONU is not gone. It's just that we had to change the format of how we do the 24-hour navigation to continue the mission and relaunch HONU later. But right now we have to follow social distancing guidelines, and I'll speak about that coming up. Next slide, please. Okay, so getting into just about to get into Post, HONU's design was very different from Post. The HONU design was inflatable shelters that would be erected in a underutilized park. The amount of shelters we had could have housed over 80 individual spaces with bunk beds more, or 100 family members. They were very customizable, so the interiors could be changed into any size or space that you needed. And it was designed this way so that any category of space could be satisfied, whether it was a large family, a small family, you needed more female beds, male beds, whatever it may be, we would never have to say no. We designed HONU to be a service-oriented hub where services and direct access to programs could be provided. And the vision was always that partner agencies and providers would see it as a resource, not a competing program to anybody's, but just somewhere that's a city 24-hour center where they can come and do case management, see their clients while they're there, or even bring someone. So it served as a temporary overnight shelter until services became available. So from running this for the 3 months we did, and Post now for about 8 months, it's been very handy to a lot of outreach groups to where at nighttime, there's not really a lot of places that are doing intake, or none. So to bring someone into Post or HONU and let them get a meal and get a shower and some care items, they sleep the night, they're safe. In the morning, providers can come back and then get them into something they need to go into, whatever fits best for the person. Next slide, please. So on site, we have civilian navigation staff. We do have specially trained officers at the HONU and now the post that are they're help trained, and they're officers that have a little bit more training in crisis intervention, um, de-escalation, ways of looking at outreach differently from enforcement. But right now, the staff that actually do our navigation, they are civilians. They're not officers. They're called community service specialists. They came over from the HONU program, and they're our bridge between the officers and the existing shelter services. And a lot of them have backgrounds in social work and degrees in social work. So this streamlines the verification process because they know how the system works. They've worked with HMIS. They've worked with a lot of things that providers have to do, which officers don't deal with. So they know a lot of the requirements and things that shelters need, and it kind of streamlines the process and helps us keep updated on shelter availability. For the officers, it helps that they have a single number to call to offer safe shelter and services. And the barriers are absolutely as low as we could make them. So the HONU and then now with the post, we designed these programs to where someone doesn't need a homeless verification letter. They don't need money. They don't need a limit to the amount of pets or property they have. We work with anybody and everything. The only limiting factor for an individual of getting into like a HONU or post would be if they're extremely aggressive and the care or their needs cannot be met. So it's HONU is not a medical facility, and neither is post. So someone with extreme needs that might become agitated or violent, it's not really the right place for them. They need something else. So that would be a factor that we couldn't take someone, but we do take people that might be under the influence of substances. Like I said, with animals, with property, we transport, so they don't have to find a way over to us. We send out a contracted driver. Even some of the officers have done courtesy transport. So it's very good in the way that it helps, and that's we found that officers love to use it because they don't get any roadblocks. It's just call the number and then we'll help the person out. Next slide, please. So in December to March, we were in Waipahu Cultural Garden, and the program assisted 253 individuals. And that would be either at least one night of services or stabilization. Some of the people didn't want to stay or be navigated to something else, so they would leave. And very few people were asked to leave for violating rules because we have very, very loose rules. 152 of that group in Waipahu Culture Garden were navigated to more permanent housing. Next slide, please. We went to Old Stadium in March to April. 174 people were provided services. We saw a huge need in town, and 105 were navigated to permanent. Now, this deployment in Stadium was supposed to go 90 days. The HONU model was 90 days. The picture you can see there is kind of how it was laid out, right? So I'll show you with post, it's much different, the layout. The fencing that we have around our zones, their designation, those are really short fences. So it's not to keep people in, it's to designate an area. And the deployment ended short of our planned 90 days because of COVID. Next slide, please. So now we'll get into the provisional outdoor screening and triage that I've explained how it started. So what you can see there is an early picture of the one post site. Right now we have 5 post sites up. This picture was taken from a helicopter. It was a military helicopter. We can't fly drones or unmanned aerial vehicles in that area because of the airport. So we just use the photos we have. I know it's grainy, but you can see the format change already right there from that picture from the last and this one. But with post, we knew that people had to social distance, so they're in individual campgrounds. And you can see the designation on the area. One thing I will notate on this picture is that, before we go to the next slide, is all of those campgrounds that you see there, the people that stay in each of those campgrounds are not told that they can't put their personal property in that campground. People just decided to keep everything within their tent and keep it very neat. And it was kind of interesting to me because I know if you see a lot of encampments that are on the street or around, sometimes there can be a lot of things around. But we didn't force anybody to downsize or ask them to. Everyone that came in kept everything within their tent. And we have officers on site around the clock, so it's not like anyone's going to be messing around in each other's campground. It was just an interesting thing that I found. Next slide, please. So like I said, it was created to continue the HONU mission. So we knew that we had to continue the diversionary options for officers. If officers don't have somewhere to send somebody, then you really can't get a good outcome when you're dealing with someone that might be on shelter and want services. We don't have any ability as police to get someone into an existing shelter or understand the intake rules straight from the street. Private providers and shelters have rules that need to be adhered to and intake procedures, and we can't expect the officers to know each and every shelter's rules or the intake hours or even someone to take them straight from the street, because, you know, as we all know, there's wait lists and there's capacity limitations. So we had to continue the HONU mission, and we knew that we had to change format for post. And the photo on the right, as you can see, one of our community service specialists and one of our sites, each site is spaced by 8 to 12 feet. We did that on purpose so that people could sit outside their tent and have social distancing, have designated barriers to where other people respected the stay a decent distance from each other, so we can mitigate the spread. Next slide, please. So the post, different from the HONU, it was initially operated in a 5-site rotation between Kehi Lagoon and the Hua Community Park. The best way I can explain it without drawing it for anybody is that we had to think of a way how we could social distance and then mitigate the spread, and also hold our unsheltered members of the community to the same standard as the people that are sheltered or have houses. Under the eyes of the police, we try our best to be absolutely fair. We don't treat people differently if they're unsheltered or sheltered, house owners, non-house owners. So when the mayor's lockdown order was put into effect, people were supposed to shelter in place at their houses. So running the post as a come and go as you please encampment was not something that we could do, because it would not be fair that the public cannot come and go in the community, and then people staying at our post in the city facility were just could just come and go. But in the other sense, we can't force people to stay. You can't do that. So post has never been you cannot leave. It's always been free to leave. How we designed it was the 5-site rotation initially with the lockdown order was that there's 5 days into a zone that is on intake. And because the time-based quarantine was about 14 days, after the 5-day intake period, guests were allowed to come and go as they please. Come and go as you please, as much as you want. Once the 5 days ended in the intake zone, that particular zone, which was about the size of a HONU zone, would go into what's called a lockdown. And by lockdown, it means there's no new intakes. Now, people could leave. They could walk out if they wanted to. And we did have a lot of people leave and then come back, and they would be welcomed back into an intake zone. So one zone would go on lockdown, and then other zone would be on intake. We always had an intake zone. So the rule was they couldn't re-enter the same zone, because now you're a danger to your campmates. You could have gone anywhere, 7-Eleven, anywhere, and got infected. And now the people that are trying to self-quarantine and get safety and are scared of COVID, if we allowed you back into that zone, you could infect them. So to contain and be able to track the spread if there was an outbreak, that person that would leave and come back, now you'd have to go into an intake zone. And, you know, we found that each zone, as they rotated, each zone started with about 25 people after intake. And then at the end of the 15 days, they usually ended up anywhere from 10 to 12 or even sometimes 9. But it was almost a source of like accomplishment for people that, hey, you know, they stuck it out, and then they would go on to Blue Zone. Blue Zone operated essentially like a HONU. And of course, from the very beginning, we provided PPE, water, temperature checks, food, and social distancing. Next slide, please. So this is a loose diagram of essentially how that flow would work, if you can picture it. The triangles would they would represent encampments or individuals. They would enter into the red post facility. We called it red because it was high risk. We didn't know if anyone had COVID. Um, they would intake into one of the intake zones, and then they would, if they completed the 14-day or 15-day quarantine, they would go on to a blue facility. If anyone exhibited symptoms or COVID positive, they'd have to go on to the TQuick through the CARES line or to medical services. Yellow never really launched because we didn't find a need for it, and it wasn't something that we were going to manage anyways. So blue and red satisfied. Blue was in Lehua, and it worked very well. So when you left red, you go to blue. From blue, we ran like a HONU to where we tried to work with all of our shelter partners as far as making them comfortable to take people from the blue. And there was a lot of partnerships. A lot of people were navigated. It was very successful. But I know the shelters had to depopulate to ensure social distancing, and the flow in the system became a little bit slow because there wasn't as much capacity. And another thing that we do is that because the program is person-centered, just like the HONU, we don't force anybody into any particular shelter. We'll ask people. So we'll say, where are you from? Where would you like to go? There's shelters in this area, in the west side, and center of the island. Everywhere there's a shelter, we'll give them a list. If someone says, I'm from the west side, I want to return to Waianae, the west side, we'll try to find them a shelter bed out there or something else that fits for them. I don't feel like you get the best quality of result if you force someone into something. They might have had a bad experience, and it might not be the shelter's fault, but they might have had a bad experience at shelter A or shelter B and not want to return. So if you try to force that on someone, it doesn't really work as far as the quality of the referral. And we try to let people decide on their own. And then when the bed becomes available or the space, that's when we work with the shelter to get them transported, and we would facilitate the transport. In July 2020, the post program had to consolidate and change models. This is because the lockdown order was lifted. And I'll talk about that on the next slide, please. So the lockdown order was lifted, and how I touched on earlier, because the lockdown order was lifted and people didn't have to shelter in place at home, the same applies to people that are unsheltered. So in the same model of fairness, now we have to readjust the model, because we can't do a blue zone, red zone, and a 15-day lockdown. And then if the general public is allowed to come and go from their houses, then unsheltered people in facilities should be able to come and go, in my opinion. Everyone is equal. So we had to change models again. And now we wouldn't really have a blue and a red, but we had to adjust and bring everything into Keiki Lagoon. So we brought 5 zones in Keiki Lagoon. All the zones are there. So what you would have seen as blue and red are in Keiki Lagoon. The 24-hour intake still exists. 768 HONU is the number. We do take referrals from outreach teams, service providers, officers. So if anyone watching this is a provider, if you have someone that wants to go into shelter and there's nothing available, we can take them short term. A lot of people have stayed long term because of what we're dealing with right now in a pandemic. But we do allow that. The current way that it works is there's 4 clear zones and 1 intake zone. We have COVID testing now, so the way to track and mitigate the spread of COVID the best we can is that when I say 4 clear zones, people are allowed to come and go from a clear zone. 1 zone is on intake, and the other 4 are considered clear because everyone's been tested negative for COVID. They can still come and go from those clear zones. There's no rules like the lockdown to where if they leave and come back, they have to go into an intake zone. They can stay in their clear zone. New intakes won't come in that zone at that time. They'll be in an intake zone, and that rotates around. But and I know that we're aware that someone could, when they come and go, contract COVID and bring it back into their clear zone. But I haven't seen that we haven't actually, I don't think, had 1 instance of that. All of our COVID positives have been new intakes. So allowing people to come and go in clear zones has not caused any sort of spread in our post. I don't think I've had even 1 case. It's the new intakes that we take in. And in that intake zone, people are tested. And once they're tested negative, people will move from an intake zone to a clear zone. As of November 18th, there were 65 people residing on the site. As of today, there's 71 on the site. So it can fluctuate day to day depending on the referrals we get from officers, depending on the needs in and out. We kind of take our active count by how many people are on site. So if people don't return, their campground still exists for them, but we don't count them as being actively on the site. So the numbers can kind of be confusing at times. Next slide, please. So guests are provided 2 meals a day and special dietary needs are accommodated. So for if you're vegan or you can't eat certain things or you have stomach problems, diabetes, we try to accommodate everything we can. Bottled water, we ice the water so it's cold. Snacks are provided daily. We have salty and sweet snacks and fruit cups that we chill. Guests can charge their electronic devices around the clock. So we found this was very important because I know for me and for a lot of people, our electronic devices, they're a big part of our lives, and sometimes they can take stress off just watching a video, playing a game, whatever. And I know that unsheltered people, they have electronic devices, and when you have those devices charged, it can take a little stress off, and you can contact your case managers, stay in touch with family, and we find that it helps out a lot for people to be able to charge when they want and how they want. Next slide, please. All the sites that we have now have seating areas with shade. We've tried to make it as comfortable as possible. There's not really a lot of complaints about the heat out in Kehi Lagoon. There's a lot of wind out there. We allow guests to make comfort items at the post, so coffee's allowed. People have plugged in TVs. They've plugged in. One guy had a karaoke machine. We try to be super flexible. I mean, we're completely green at post, so we're running off pure solar power to not try to impact the environment or the surrounding area. But so we are limited in what our battery capacity is. But we tried to prepare for that, and we are very flexible. And like I've always reiterated, even in the current model that we're in, from the lockdown model, guests have always been free to leave at any time. And right now, they come and go, and it's everyone's pretty happy. Next slide, please. This is another picture of one of our seating areas. The seating area on the left that you can see, it is essentially, we have easy corner tents set up like that where providers can come in and talk with clients. It's good to call ahead to ask if there's an open one, because a lot of providers come and go, but you really don't need to. If someone wants to just show up and say, I think one of my clients is in post, we can facilitate you to talk to them. And we've done that for unannounced visits for certain agencies, and then it's fine. It's not a big deal. We'll provide water and power if you need it. On the right, that's one of our solar trailers. So that trailer powers the whole site. There's 2 of them. That trailer has a battery bank inside of it, and it stores energy during the day, provides power to the site, and then runs the site overnight. Next slide, please. So as far as the COVID response post, our first positive case was recorded on September 1st. So we went from March or April all the way to September with not a single positive, which was very shocking and interesting. We had our first one September 1st. That was a person on intake, and we've had 11 total cases since September 1st. In every case, we transferred the individuals to medical care or via the CARES line or ambulance. That's the T-Quick, the hotels, or the hospital the same day, within a few hours usually. It's not too bad, but we've been very good at mitigating the spread. Intakes continued uninterrupted. We never had to pause or halt intakes. Everything continued because of our rotational model. So when we had a positive case, we had so many zones active that we had clear zones where they feel safe, they're okay. In our intake zone, which is where the positives would happen, we would quickly tell the person, let them know that we're going to get you medical care, and then they would isolate in their tent, and then we never had any large community spread. Our low barriers continued. The guidelines remain unchanged. We have never become more strict, and we won't until this ends. Next slide, please. So we still do COVID-19 tests multiple times a week. We actually have medical services on site, and they're provided by IHS, and the Hawaii Home Project comes a few times a week. And also the Hawaii National Guard medics staff the site daily until darkness. Next slide, please. And that helps a lot, so I would like to say that having medical on site, we found, is extremely helpful, because a lot of times people that are unsheltered, they wouldn't have the same access, transportation, or care that maybe people that have a car or house would, or medical insurance. And we found, even through the Joint Outreach Center in Chinatown and even at Post, that having the ability to help someone with like a wound that wasn't treated, or some kind of a pain in their stomach, or something they were having on site, is very helpful, because otherwise an officer would have to call an ambulance, EMS, to deal with any level of care. They're not going to be able to do it on their own. And at Post, that's part of the triage and stabilization, is that, we don't want someone to have pre-existing unmanaged health issues and then get COVID and then have that get worse. We try to stabilize people to where the best we can, and get them what they need. And, we've had a lot of success stories, and I can't go over all of them, but I did want to talk about a few that we've had at Post that were very unique and might be interesting to the people watching. Is one of the first ones that I actually heard about was during our lockdown phase. There was a male in his upper 50s, and he had entered the Post during the stay-at-home order. This particular male, it was like the 12th or 13th day, he told staff his story, and he said prior to getting in the Post, he used meth every day. He's a heavy meth user. And he said that he went into the Post because he did not want to get COVID. He was scared, and he found that the 15-day quarantine in his site, when it went on lockdown, he would see his campmates drop out. It was almost like a source of pride for the people that battled through it. We provided everything we could for people in the lockdown zones, but it was almost like a game show or survivor, where people each day, someone might say, you know what, I can't stay in place. I got to move. I got to be around, and they'd leave. And from the 25 you might start with, you're down to 20, you're down to 15. This guy towards the end of the quarantine, he told us a story, and he said that he forced himself to not use drugs the whole time, and he's going clean. And the structured environment and the fear that if he left that quarantine zone, he'd have to start all over in an intake zone with Post and start the whole 15 days over, caused him to say, no, I'm going to power through this. And he actually went to the blue zone and was navigated. And it was a huge success, because he said he hadn't had a lot of he would break rules at other shelters. He didn't have a lot of success. And next slide, please. Another touching story was a female in her 40s. She had pretty severe behavior, health, and substance abuse concerns. She was heavily disliked law enforcement, and this one was she had extensive prior police contact, and this particular female would had some issues with where real quickly things would escalate, and it took a lot of de-escalation to talk to this person. Sometimes it would involve weapons when officers would go, and she was very well known, 911 calls from that stuff. She went to OCCC, and when she was released, she came to Post. And during her stay, she stabilized, and she's become friends with the officers. And when I have visits at Post, she wants to talk to the media and talk to people and tell them how it's changed her life. And these are the officers that used to encounter her. And she was assisted to receive federal stimulus money at the site. A lot of our civilians and partners have helped people out there. She went and paid off a debt to family that was kind of a point of contention with her family that has been owed for years. And her family, from her story, offered her to come home and say, hey, you come home, live with family. You look better. You look good, right? And she said no. She said, I want to do it on my own, and Post is treating me well, and I want to go on to something on my own and do it on my own. and she's currently awaiting a permanent housing voucher. She's still at post, and she's doing very well. Next slide, please. The last one I'll talk about is another one where we had a female in her 40s, and she had some substance abuse issues and behavioral health concerns, but she came to post 3 times. She came in and she left, came in, left. And she was actually a HONU client as well. And it wasn't she left for bad reasons. She just couldn't be successful in an environment and always felt she needed to move and always felt she needed to move. And I know she had been had problems with some of the shelters where broken rules. So we worked with her over and over and over again. And that's part of it where even if someone walks out or breaks a rule, as long as it doesn't, it's not violence, then if you can bend your rules and try to help someone, you might be lucky on the 3rd or 4th time. And that's what we found here was she was successfully navigated, and she ran into an officer on the street. This is just recently, and wanted to relay a message to one of my officers, Alan E. Brow, and the post staff that she's back on her feet with an apartment on Kalakaua Avenue with her animals, and she wants to donate to the post program as a thank you. And that was kind of, a big deal because it took over and over and over the help trying to help her, and it eventually worked. Next slide, please. So I'll end the presentation with just some of the numbers that people can think over. Is from April to the current, over 680 individuals have actually come in and stayed at least one night. And we've had a lot of repeats, but that 680 is the unique entries into our logs. So they've come and stayed at least one night, and most staying longer, most staying a few weeks. Nobody can ever get 100% of people to go on to something else. But of the 680 to date, we've had 345 navigated into more permanent housing options. And this would include brick and mortar emergency shelters, treatment programs, relocated to the mainland. They flew in from the mainland. And unfortunately, there is cases of people flying in just to be homeless in Hawaii, but we don't discriminate in any way where someone can't come into post. If they're homeless here, if we didn't help them, they're just going to be homeless in one of the neighborhoods or unsheltered. And it's not really right to not let someone in just because they flew in. So we've relocated a lot of people back to the mainland, outer island. We reunited a lot of people with family because family is willing to, we've found that someone stabilizes and they feel better, they look better. Family says, hey, wow, they're on their way, and permanent housing even, straight from post. So, some of the success that makes you feel good is that this number is old, over 15,000 meals, is probably closer to 20,000 now, have been served out at the post. And this is from generous donations from River of Life serves meals out there a lot. They serve meals every day. IHS prepares meals. HPD has been using our inventory of MREs and heater meals, thousands of them, for people that come into the site, because those kinds of things, they have snacks, and MREs have like vegetarian options and stuff. So people tend to like them. It's kind of interesting. I know it might sound weird, but we've used thousands of those. And various other groups have brought in food and hot dogs. Officers have bought pizza for the whole site out of their own money, and just trying to make it a comfortable environment where people feel safe. And for me, I think that we've done a pretty good job mitigating spread and just giving someone a place, and even if they stay for a week or so. And there's a lot of care items we give people that have been donated by like Hawaiian Airlines and different organizations, to where someone might not have a toothbrush and they get that there, toilet paper, a hot shower. So, it's I think at the end of this, hopefully people can see this program that HPD, has been putting kind of our whole heart into as far as the social portion of it, and kind of weigh this with, I know there's a lot of media attention to enforcements, and we get caught in the middle because we don't create the laws. We just have to enforce them. So we always have this 50-50 where half the community wants more social services and half want more enforcement. And we try to always do a balanced approach to everything. And this program is purely person focused. So I feel like it's been a great use of some of the CARES money that HPD has received. And it's I mean, I'm sure we've saved lives because the people out there have found safety, and some of them said they couldn't even sleep at night in encampments or on the streets, worried either about being attacked, being assaulted, either sweeps, whatever it may be, and they can actually lay down here and find comfort, and that's kind of a big deal. And next slide, please. So now I'll take questions. I know I kind of went long. I wanted to provide more time for questions, but any questions anybody may have?
Thank you, Sergeant Weber. That was really appreciated. So we are going to head into the Q&A portion. Then, if this is the case, Help and HONU folks had a great collaborative with HARC, law enforcement, so also known as LEAD, pilot area was restricted to D1, S1, Chinatown area. Is an expansion of the LEAD program be something HPD or COU is interested in seeing?
Oh, expansion LEAD program. So LEAD's a very good program. From the very beginning, we really tried to work with the Hawaii Health and Harm Reduction Center, and I know David Shaku and then Heather Lusk. They do great things, and we've tried to find a way to do LEAD, actual LEAD diversion. But the problem that we've run into is that I know the prosecutor's office here in Honolulu was in a transition period for a while. They had some issues over there, and we need them on board to do diversion from criminal cases, or whatever the statute may be. So without them, we can't shred or throw away tickets or divert criminal cases without them being on board. So it's very difficult if we have to find common ground with the prosecutors. We're still working on. I do support LEAD, and I know there's new leadership at the prosecutor's office, so it's something that moving forward, I think, is a great thing to look into.
Excellent. So let's go into the next question. So another participant had asked, did you say that whether there was a time limit for how long people can stay at post?
Yeah, so that's a great question. There's no time limit. So it's like I said, it's a person-centered program to where what fits for that person. When they come in, if someone says, I only want to return, or I only want to go to Waianae, and they say WCC is the best fit for them, we're not going to kick them out. So we'll wait until a bed becomes available, and then we'll get them over to where they need to go. Or if they want to wait, like the lady I talked about in the success story where she has a voucher, right? What's going to work best for her? To get her voucher, get into permanent housing, try to get into an apartment, or for us to have her go to a brick and mortar shelter, maybe where she had some issues or couldn't follow rules. We'll do what's best for the person. So we do not have a time limit, no.
Absolutely. So I'm not viewing any other questions inside of the chat, but we did have a comment from earlier. It says from Ellen comments, the post sounds great, and Mahalo Lieutenant for a great presentation.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I know there's feedback, I know, and it might sound weird, but I'm on a laptop, so I don't have like a headset like Jonah does.
But yes, it's great humanitarian work, and we really appreciate it, Sergeant Rubio. As a social work student too, it really does touch my heart that some of these success stories that are coming in are really great portion of like the success of what the program really is.
Thank you.
I do have a question. One question I think is kind of commonly asked since we kind of have time, and that for me is what would be the difference between the post and a regular shelter?
What would be the difference between post and what?
And a regular shelter.
So the difference between post and a regular shelter is post is like HONU, where it is a navigation center. So it's not meant to be a long-term shelter. It's meant to move. It's meant to be mobile and go nearest to where the need is. So where brick and mortar might move someone onto a transitional or something else, post tries to stabilize and get someone into the next place, like a brick and mortar shelter. And some of the differences might be that post is, I look at post as like a place where you can collect anybody, no matter their issue they're having, lack of ID, numerous pets. So our barriers are a lot lower than a lot of shelters or all the shelters, but And that's not against the shelters. Shelters are a facility, right? You have to abide by what they need to operate their shelter. For us, we're trying to stabilize, so we can be very flexible and get someone to that point, hopefully with by their choice of registering their animals. The shelter needs that, verifying certain things. We don't need ID to get into post, but you may. I don't know if you may need it where you want to go, but we try to get all that prepared so someone's ready. Yeah.
Amazing. So how has the post been for as far as the amount of people who are coming in from the streets? Have you found that they really that there's a big increase in how many people that are being intake because of the popularity of the post right now during this time of COVID?
Yeah, so it's a good question, Jonah. So what I found was that in the beginning, when the lockdown order was placed in effect, and this was the start of the post, we had a huge amount of people in there. I mean, sometimes we were up to like 80 or 90 a day. When the lockdown order lifted, our numbers reduced to maybe around 40, 30 something or 40 per day. And the second lockdown order, stay-at-home order, we swelled up almost 100 again. And the strange thing is, I think that word of mouth has got around that it's a very good program, even though there's police there. Because a lot of times I think people have their preconceived notions of police, but we have 71 today, and the lockdown order is not in effect. We're working very hard to try to utilize wherever we can get people into the shelter system, but we found that a lot of people want to come to post, and the volume is not reducing at all. Maybe that's because people feel safe. They get testing, they get medical, they get food. I mean, if I was unsheltered, I mean, post we've created it pretty well. Everything you would need to survive is given to you there, and you get that regardless. If you can go out, you can leave and go to 7-Eleven, the stores, go do whatever you want to do, and you still get all of those things inside of post. So it's a way to come back and feel like you have a home, right? Like you have a safe place. You're coming home. You can lay down, play with your devices, drink some water. The officers are super nice. They'll hand out, some people come up and ask for crackers or Pop-Tarts or things multiple times. And we don't really limit people to what they ask for. I mean, if someone wants 2 or 3 fruit cups, if that makes them happy, makes them a little bit calm, then that's fine. Fine. It's not, to me, I think when you treat people like that and you don't run it like a business, because for me, I don't get compensated by the amount of people. I'm a government worker, so it doesn't matter if there's 10 people in post or 100. So for me, the happiness of a person, if I can get success stories from navigation, I mean, that's less interaction that the police might have to have with someone that otherwise might turn negative, and that doesn't help anybody. I mean, it's if a person can get services and get stabilized, that's the best result, right?
Yes, absolutely. So just to maybe maximize the time for our event just a little bit more, I will maybe try to ask maybe a couple more questions. And if anybody else has any questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A. We're here to talk.
I can see the chat now. Okay. I can see the chat, so they can type it. I found a way to bring it up. So
okay. Yeah. For the Q&A though, we have one coming in. Can anybody just walk in? And I think that comes with the understanding that if somebody is looking for services, can they just walk up to the post and say, "Hey, can I get services?"
Well, they could, but that's going to be hard because the K Lagoon Park is closed. So we don't encourage people walking up just for the safety of the guests at the post. This is because it's a self-quarantine zone. So everyone there feels safe, has safety, everyone at the post. And for the respect of them, everyone that's staying there that's been tested, advertising that people could just walk up to the facility would endanger the people that have stayed and got tested and have medical. So we wouldn't exclude someone if they walked up, but I don't think that's a good idea for people just to do that. If someone did walk up, which we haven't had really an issue with, we would just have someone talk to them about the program and see if they're a good fit. And if they are a good fit, they could come in. It's not going to be something that's going to exclude someone, but we don't encourage that because it's like I said, it's kind of the other participants. We have to take their considerations into account, right? So that's where the screening comes in on the road. with either a provider, the officers, the hospitals, is that they're going to be talking to this person, seeing if they're exhibiting symptoms, if they need medical care, finding out if they don't have medical needs that exceed the capability of the post. That's kind of a screening, right? It's very low screening, but then it helps, right? And then we know who's coming in and then what they may need.
Okay, and I think that I see something else coming into the chat right now. If you're able to do that too at the same time. So one attendee is asking if there is a hotline for them to call to get into post for assistance.
Yeah, it's 768-4668, 768 HONU. That's the line. The navigation specialist that answer that phone, they can assist someone into getting transport into post. If you're a social service provider, feel free to call. You can ask questions. If you want to visit and see what you'd be referring someone into, you can definitely come and visit. And that's if you want to come down and bring one of your clients down, come down. You can sit with them. You can visit them every day. We're very open, very transparent. So.
Awesome. And can you repeat that number one more time, Sergeant William?
Oh, that's 768 HONU.
And thank you. So the next Q&A also comes from the same kind of participant. She's also asking if there's also bus passes and transportation services or transportation attendants.
Yeah, so we don't have bus passes there. What we do for transportation is if someone has a medical appointment or if they have something that's they need to go to, we have facilitated that through our contract. If someone leaves to go to another facility, we always facilitate that back and forth. We'll always pick people up, but we don't do general transport like to the grocery store or something. We don't do that. And unfortunately, we don't have bus passes, but we do take care of like medical appointments and things. We make sure people can get to those.
Okay. And let me see here. And I think this was already covered though in your presentation, but would you be able to reiterate one more time about how long the client is able to stay at the site?
Yeah, so people can stay as long as they need until we find something appropriate for them to go to. So if there's no set time limit, if it takes a month or two to get someone into what they want to go to, then we'll let them stay. We don't charge anything to be out there. We don't care how much income they have or what they.
They pay with love.
Yeah.
They pay with love.
Yeah, the appreciation is always the payment because like I said, I see that officers, anytime you're involved in enforcements or things people like to refer to as sweeps, which we don't like that word, and it's so negative that all the good work we do, it's good to get see the success stories.
That's right. I have one question here. If one of their clients does not have a phone, how can they call 768 HONU? What other ways to get in touch with police?
Yeah, so if your client doesn't have a phone, they can call 911. Our dispatchers are aware of the HONU program. So the first question they'll get asked is 911, is this an emergency? And they'll say, no, it's not an emergency. They can call from a pay phone, from another person's phone. And then all they would have to say to the dispatcher is, I'd like to get information about the HONU program or the post program or enter it. And then the dispatcher will send out a officer to talk to the person. And they'll send out the right officer. It's not going to be, they're not going to come out and, this type of a call is going to go to the correct person where it's not going to be someone having a bad day that's going to tell them something weird. It's going to be someone coming out there and telling them about the program. The officer will call the post and get the transport for the person. So it's very easy. A lot of people do that. I've had a lot of people call. Yeah. Oh, you typed it in there. That's basically it. You just call 911. The dispatchers know about it. It's easy. And I think any cell phone, it's regulated. They have to be able to call emergency, even if the SIM card is not activated. So pay phones, a person's phone, a deactivated phone, or flag down an officer, or walk to the police station. Any of those things.
That's a great description, and I think that a lot of people are also kind of have the same questions at the same time because they are interested in the post, and it's a great service, and I think that people would like to get more info on top of it. But if you don't mind, Sergeant Oni, I'm just going to do this the end of closing for this part. We are getting towards the bottom of the hour.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much. So if anybody does have any more questions that haven't been addressed today, we apologize, but Sergeant O'Neill is willing to follow up on the questions through his email at JONEAL number one, all one word, at honolulu.gov. And we'll put that inside of the chat as well. Mahalo again, Sergeant O'Neill, for sharing with us your time during this busy week.
Thank you.
Everyone who was able to tune in with us to this panel. Anyone who is continuing with other conference panels, please return to the City and County Mayor's Office housing page so you can review the other links to the other panels and closed plenaries, as well as continuing education units form, also known as the CEU, will be posted with instructions attached. I will put that in our chat as well as Sergeant O'Neill's contact information.
Oh, I can't send. Okay. Thanks. I was trying to type thanks to someone in the chat. Thanks, David, and thanks for everything you guys do. Thank you for everybody that watched. I appreciate it.